Hello everyone, this is Peacock Entertainment and we are back again, and we're now going to do a season review of Supergirl and its 5th season. It recently wrapped up its 5th season with its 19th episode. As we all know, this season, just like the rest of the CW shows, have been affected by the COVID-19 and they weren't able to complete their full regular quota of 22 episodes, so the majority of them had to stop either on their 19th or 20th episode. So as of all these reviews, I will take that into account when reviewing episodes and the overall season. So we're just going to go now into the setup overall for their 5th season. So I will be going into spoiler details, so if you haven't seen the season yet or you haven't caught up with all the episodes, I advise you to stop watching now, go back, watch the rest of the episodes, and then come back to this review on here. So the 5th season we picked up at the end of the previous year, which of course the most significant event was that Lena killed Lex, but prior to killing him, Lex had revealed to Lena Supergirl's identity and that Kara had been hiding it from Lena. And again, this then sparked off the big arc of Lena kind of turning against Supergirl, turning against Kara, and she kind of went on this dark, villainous story arc. I'm going to remark about that more later on because I've got a few issues, and I think that's one of the big things that I think worked against this season. We also had the introduction of virtual technology, and initially I think especially when we look at the first couple of episodes, it kind of seems that the show was going to make some sort of big commentary about the over-reliance on technology, how it affects people and our society in general. And this was brought to the forefront when we had the character known as Andrea Rajos, who came in and she took over Catco, and she was going to introduce this new VR setup, Obsidian technology, where we saw that people could access virtual reality through these blue lenses, and that was going to be a running theme throughout the entire season. We also had the emergence of John's brother Malefic, his Martian relative, who wanted to come back to Earth and gain revenge against John. We of course had the other big story arc, was the mysterious Levaithian organization, who had various agendas and secret operations, and over the course of the season we've seen how they were going to work against Supergirl and the DEO, and they had their own ambitions to take over the world. The other big event throughout this season, of course, was the Crisis on Infinite Earths. This was, of course, the big massive crossover. It had a significant impact against all of the CW shows. Primarily with Supergirl, this had the biggest impact because it really did change the whole continuity, not in terms of the current season stories, but in terms of the entire series story. It really kind of changed the whole dynamic and the whole setting within the show, and I'll talk about it later on when I go about what worked and what didn't work. But that was the other massive feature of the story arc throughout, and how it handled the crisis and the post-crisis events on here. There was another milestone, of course, for this 2 season, because this was the season that Supergirl hit its 100th episode. Again, I will always remark that's a great landmark for any show, regardless whether people like it or not, to be able to sustain and hit 100 episodes, whether you go for 4, 5 seasons. I think that's always a good indication of that a show has been able to garner a consistent audiences to be deemed successful enough to reach 100 episodes. So well done to the show for that. There was also the other event, of course, that this was the last season for Mikael Brooks, who played Jimmy Olsen since the first season. He exited the show, I believe it was within the first 5 or 6 episodes, and I think we could generally agree that the role of Jimmy Olsen had kind of come to a halt. He initially was the, of course, photographer within the Catco, but then he later on went on to become the kind of CEO, and then he had relationships with Lena, and he then again adopted the identity of Guardian. And I think overall, they could never quite get a fit really on Jimmy and his role on there and make him a significant member. It just never worked for me, the whole being a CEO and then being Guardian as well. That just, plausibility wise, even for a comic book show, that never truly worked. So I wasn't really that surprised that they kind of exited the character. And I think Mikael Brooks as well as an actor just felt he didn't really have enough material to carry on with the show. So there were no real complaints on here. So we're just going to go now what worked within the show. So I think overall, as with all these CW shows, the actors, they still remain very compelling and very likeable and rootable characters on here. Melissa Benoist continues to be as rootable and as cheerable as ever as Kara Danvers on here, as does Charlie Lee, as Alex as well. Again, continuing on with her. They kind of had shifted a bit of dynamic away now from the fact that she was pursuing to be a mother, much more that she wanted to kind of go on her own and basically investigate crimes. We saw the development that she kind of quits the DEO. So again, I think they want to give Alex a bit more freedom, so this makes her able to be more involved, if you like, within the kind of big encounters and the big fights that they have. I think they probably felt that having her just rooted to that kind of leader within the DAO kind of limited the range of what she could do on here. And we had that one episode where she went under the VR tech, and that was very good, where we saw her in the kind of Supergirl version of the costume and exploring her feelings and emotions a bit more. So I think there were some good elements that was added to Alex on here. David Hayward again remains a very strong, very stern presence as John Jones. Nia is a good presence as always as Dreamer, as is Brainy as well. So I think the core group of heroes and the core group of characters, they all remain very strong out here. So in terms of the concept of the show, I think there was a good intent to explore, if you like, the effects of the virtual technology and the Leviathan as well. Having a secret organisation that was always hidden in the background, hidden in the shadows. On paper, that was a very novel approach, and it's good that they didn't try to repeat the same beats, if you like, what we had overall season. So, and I think that's a strength for the show. So, what I mean by that, in season 3, we had the superpowered villain in Rain, and then in season 4, we had different antagonists in terms of Ben Lockwood and Manchester Black. So, in concepts, they went for a different take again by having the Leviathan organisation. And the good thing you can have about that is that you never know who's really in charge, and it can attack you from all different angles. So maybe you could have superpowered beings one hand, but then it's affecting you on a different hand in terms of maybe having more assassinated attacks or people attacking you from media kind of avenues as well. So the secret organisation on paper could be a good asset to have to your storytelling. And like I said, it didn't repeat the same beats, and we didn't have the same type of antagonists throughout on here. So that was a novel approach in concept. Now, I'm going to go on to what didn't work. So, building on from what I've just said about the Leviathan, I just feel it didn't really work. They didn't really maximise on having that secretive organisation working on the background. You know, what were Leviathan really trying to achieve? What were they after? You know, they kept shifting the goalposts throughout the whole season. They want to take over Catco. Are they involved in this virtual tech? Do they want to kill Supergirl? Are they working with Lex? You know, it just, they couldn't get a foothold really on who Leviathan was, who really was in charge. You know, we had that really kind of hokey old guy, the Earthbender, and later on we had the other Earthbenders involved as well. You know, that was really didn't work. He was kind of felt forced in. And then we had other antagonists take on the role later on, and it just never really felt that there was one kind of dominant force driving the Leviathan, and that was the major arc you were building throughout your season, and it just never really convinced to me, and they never really utilised the opportunity, I felt, for having a more clandestine operation working in the background. And I think the other story arcs as well, this whole reliance on virtual technology, again, there was no real driving force behind that. They kind of started off as if they wanted to make a big statement about the reliance on technology, but it kind of got drifted and it kind of got left away as we focused on other story arcs. And again, it just, the message never really came to fruition. It never built a strong statement as what they were trying to say about this whole technology. And again, the threat level just wasn't there, in my opinion. It just didn't feel that they had a concentrated focus on what they were trying to say. Again, the arc with the Malefic was okay, but again, never felt really that significant. It never really lasted as long. There was potential, and I think they could have used him as maybe to be one of the primary antagonists of the show, but then they had him more of this redemption arc, and again, he just never really felt that important. He kind of just goes away at the end, and you never feel any real resonance to his overall participation within this season. Now, we're going to go on to the big issue that I've had, and if you've watched my reviews previously on Supergirl, you know what I'm going to say now, and it's regarding Lena. Now, as I've mentioned before, many reviews, Lena has been one of the most strongest characters throughout the whole season. I think she was introduced primarily in season 2, I believe, and then she really comes to fruition throughout season 3, throughout season 4. She's a very intelligent, strong, very savvy character, despite the fact that initially I felt when she was introduced, she's going to be just the cliched female Lex. They really have developed a character where she's much more compelling throughout, where she's always helping the heroes and she's always been the protagonist, but she's got her own issues, her own agenda. Of course, we know with her mother and trying to come out with the whole shadow of Lex and trying to find her own individuality, despite the fact that she's a strong CEO. We've always looked at Lena as somebody who's wanted to be just like the others, like Kara, like Alex, like Jimmy, like John. She just wants to be part of that group and part of that dynamic, and she just wants to be felt as if she's liked, as if she's part of a group of friends, and her relationship with Kara was a strong fabric throughout. So the issue was here is that a lot of fans were complaining that, well, it's silly now at this point that Lena, who's really smart, really intelligent, she can't find out who Kara is. How can it that she doesn't know her true identity? This is getting a bit silly. This is getting a bit ridiculous, okay? Now, I've never had an issue with her not knowing who Kara is, but the fans did. So the writers and the producers, I think they succumbed to the fans' complaints. So this is what we got here. She found out Kara's identity at the end of the 4th season, and they went on this whole portrayal story arc where Lena, of course, she felt that Kara lied to her, and she felt really hurt by this. So they went on this whole arc where she went on this dark, villainous path. She initially told Kara she was okay with it when Kara told her at the beginning of the season, but she went on this whole hidden agenda to trap Kara, to hurt Kara. Now, if they had just kept this focus to 1 or 2 episodes where she was initially disappointed, but then they managed to, overall the season, work through it, get over it, and go back to being a friendship again, that would have been fine. But they didn't do that. They had Lena go on this whole escapade of wanting to change the human race and make it better with this whole mind control device operation, and it got to the point when she was really affecting the whole world and could have done more damage than good. And I just think it went too far. I've said again, it was a massive overreaction for Lena to go on this whole endeavour, and it was only fueled by the fact that Kara betrayed her. Now, if you had built this elements earlier on in the season, it would have given it more credibility. But to have her just go off on this whole operation again, and just to control people just because Kara didn't tell her the identity, it never rang true to me. And again, you fully understood why Kara had kept her identity from Lena. It was always much more to protect her, because as we all know, the standard superhero narrative is that if people know the hero's identity, then they're going to hurt the ones that they care about the most. So you would have thought Lena, being as smart and resourceful as she is, would have eventually come to that realization. But they didn't. They just kept it going. And again, even after the post-crisis stuff, where they had an opportunity to kind of wipe the slate clean and start again, no, they kept on that. They kept on Lena being antagonized with Kara, and they only reached the resolution at the very end. Now, I said it in my finale review, that was actually good, how they switched the dynamic at the end, and it was Lena who come to realise that, yep, she was overreacting, and that Kara had a good enough reason for keeping her identity away from her. But even then, it was only the fact that she came into encountering Lex and what he was doing Leviathan, and that's only when the penny dropped. So I've never liked the Lena dark story that they incorporated throughout this 5th season. I just felt it undercut the character, and at the very least, they come to fruition at the end of the season, and hopefully now going forward for the 6th season and beyond, that we can have them just working together again, friendship again. It's always better. I've always liked the dynamic when Lena and Kara are working together in unison, because I just think it builds a better chemistry throughout. So I'm glad that we're kind of done with that story. Another thing that I think that hurt this season was the return of Lex. Now, I was initially skeptical when they announced John Cryer in the role, but overall he has been a very good version of Lex. Maybe not quite the level of Michael Rosenbaum, what we had from Smallville. That version I will always regard that is the best screen version or interpretation of Lex Luthor. But John Cryer has been a very good addition to the show. But the problem you had here is when they brought it back for this season, they had it where Lex was kind of the master of everything. He was the one who manipulated everything. He was the one who was behind the scenes, working behind the shadows, redirecting everybody. He was the one who got the one-up on everybody. Now, I know this is a facet of the Lex Luthor character originally, that he's very smart. He's one of the smartest people within the whole DC universe. And yes, he's always had that kind of powerful influence throughout. But here, they made it so because Lex was behind everything that went on, it diminished the role of everybody else. It diminished the role of Lena, who very much felt like a side character post the Crisis storyline, and when Lex was at the forefront, you kind of got to the point where Lena, and whatever she was trying to do with whatever operation, she felt insignificant. She felt unimportant, despite the fact that they tried to make it where Lex was trying to build bridges of Lena and build a connection of her. She just felt like a side character as Lex was at the forefront. This was the same with Leviathan, okay? In the beginning, Leviathan was the kind of the main threat and they were the main influence, but Lex was multiple times able to trick Leviathan, manipulate his way around Leviathan, and again, that diminished their importance and their influence because of Lex was able to kind of get the upper hand on them all the time. So Lex was thrust into the forefront too much, and I actually felt like this at the end of season 4, where we got that, I think, that huge backstory where we had Lex and Red Daughter, and we were getting the reason as to how he managed to connect with Red Daughter and the back history there, right? And it just felt that Lex was controlling too much. He's too controlling. He's got too much influence. And that hinders the importance and the role of other characters involved on here. Now, the other big issue that I had with this season as well was the handling of the Crisis and post those events. So as I know, as I mentioned before, the Crisis on Infinite Earths had significant impact for all of these shows, and I question in particularly Supergirl's role and how they will handle it post-Crisis, once we got to that development where everybody merged together and we were all dealing with all the characters on one Earth. Now, Black Lightning handled it the best. Flash did a decent job, but the problem we had with Supergirl is that they changed the whole continuity of the whole series, right? As we know, when we began with Supergirl, Lex was in prison and Lena, of course, came to the forefront, and we had various villains alike on here. Now we flipped it. Lex was the celebrity kind of hero. He was the one that everybody viewed as this kind of person who was saving the world, helping the world, and it really, again, flips the whole dynamic of the show. Now, had they left the Crisis and not referred to it again, they may have been able to get by, but they didn't. They just kept reverting to the Crisis again and how it upset each of the events, and it just felt very confusing, and the continuity never really meshed well enough. It never really followed through throughout the season, and it just brought up various continuity errors throughout. We had this whole idea where John had kind of wiped out the memories of everybody involved, but he kept the memories of the main characters. And then we had it again when, as I mentioned before, they had an opportunity to do away with this whole Dark Lena arc, but she somehow retained their memories, or Lex filled her in with what happened, and therefore she could stay on hating Kara. Again, it just didn't work. It just felt very messy, and it just hindered the show, I think. You know, the best way to deal with the Crisis, as I said, was just to make a quick reference to it, and then carry on with your own storylines. But the way that Supergirl set up its story arcs with the Leviathan, with the Malefic storyline, with the virtual reality, with the Dark Lena stuff, because I felt early on they never really got to grips those story arcs, it had a big chance to wipe away all of those stories and maybe start again with a season 5B, if you like, and start again with all these storylines and focus more with new, fresher takes. But it never really did that, and it just never really got to grips with how it handled the crisis. So it tried to have it both ways, but I don't think it really worked. Other characters such as William, he was kind of the love interest, but then he wasn't. He felt unnecessary. As with the return of Eve Tessmacher, again, nothing wrong with the actress as well, but I just think she didn't feel as critical, as important to the events on here. So overall, if I was going to give a scoreline for Supergirl Season 5, I would have to sadly give it a 6.9 out of 10. I just think it was a major step down from Season 3 and Season 4, which were really the high marks of the series. And I felt those two series had a momentum where they were going on to maybe make Supergirl the great show. You know, I honestly have always said that prior to this season, Supergirl was the best of the CW shows in terms of when you compare it to The Flash, Legends, Black Lightning. It was the best of those shows. It just had a much more serious intent and a measured approach to its storylines with the best developed villains. But I think this season just kind of dropped the ball with the story arcs it tried to tell. The intent was there, but the execution wasn't. And I just feel that it's a rough season. It doesn't mean that Supergirl was all of a sudden become this bad show, or it can't get back to the high level it achieved the third or fourth season. I just felt it was a rough season. Every show has it, regardless of how great you think it is. Every show will have that one season where the ideas that it tried to input, the storylines it tried to make, just didn't work, and they just didn't execute them as well. And I think this is the fifth season, that rough year for Supergirl. So I just hope the sixth year, whenever we get the sixth season, and that's going to be a while, of course, because due to these COVID events, and also the fact that Melissa Benoist is pregnant, so it's going to be a bit of a debate now what the show is going to be and look like when it comes forward for its eventual sixth season. So it'll be very interesting to see how that develops and the different ideas and approaches that they take. So I think the characters are still there, the effects and the action is still there, the intent to tell a much more series and a serialized storyline is still there, but I just think they need to work better with the ideas that they introduce and execute them a bit more. And I think, unfortunately, we need to lessen the influence of Lex, because I just think he's too much of a powerful influence, and I think that diminishes the role of other characters within the show. So those are my thoughts overall on Supergirl Season 5. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Did you think it was still a strong season, or were you like me? Did you feel it was a step down from the previous seasons, which I think were, again, the high watermark of the series overall? So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think. Stay at safe distances. Take care of yourselves. And I will see you very, very soon.